Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Performance Audit and Risk Committee meeting for Tuesday morning, 3rd of August. Welcome to those that are watching on live stream. Welcome to the media. Thank you for being live in the chambers, and good to have everybody from staff and councillors present as well. We have one apology, Councillor Colin. I know, Councillor Colin Wolstein. Bill, will you move that? Second for that, please. Jeremy, thank you. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Thank you. Let's move on to the confirmation of the previous meeting minutes held on the 18th of May. Moved, Councillor. Thank you very much. Hopkins, seconded, please. We'll open it for discussion. Jeremy, thank you. Discussion. Sir Jim.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Look, I would have emailed this, but I'm not confident as to what wording should change. But on page 4, paragraph item 4.1, fourth paragraph, the third sentence reads as follows: when it was suggested that a comparative benefit of value also be done in addition to the cash analysis of the cost, I think that what we're meant to be saying there is when it was suggested that a benefit analysis or a benefit comparison also be done in addition to the analysis of cost. But as I say, I didn't feel confident to propose a set of words, so I'm just raising it and suggesting that it may need to be clarified a little, that's all.
Thank you. Any feedback, comment on that at all?
Sorry.
Leave it as is.
Sorry, can you just clarify which page?
It's page 8, fourth paragraph, item 4.1. Third sentence. I just don't think the words comparative benefit of value actually make sense, put simply.
Well, I think Ainsley would like to make a comment as well. Paul first, maybe. Paul?
Yeah, no, can't provide a clarification, sorry.
Okay. Right, Ainsley.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I spoke to the chair of the meeting about this particular point, and it was a comment that was made by you, and it was about a value analysis. So he did recall that. So that is
that reflects that.
That is
correctly.
What you
okay, right. Thank you. All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. On to page. We'll do the public excluded ones later. On to the first report, 4.1, page 14. Audit New Zealand Recommendations Activity Update. Richard or Paul, who will speak to that? Richard?
I'll start and then pass over to Mr. Maher, who's done most of the work on this. Yeah, it's just, the purpose of this is just to update the committee on the progress that has been made addressing matters raised in the audit management letter. I think the breakdown in the 3 areas is hopefully that is useful to you. A lot of the doing ones, there are significant pieces that have been completed. It's just not, the whole item hasn't been addressed. So like matters like the fraud policy, so that hasn't been introduced, but there is just some training to be undertaken. So we haven't signed that off as complete. 2 of the to-do items can only be done at the end of the financial year and then reviewed as part of the next audit process. So that's why they are outstanding. And then, yeah, there's a good level of completion in those last couple of pages of the report. But Mr. Maher, if you'd like to add anything else.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Just adding to Mr. Hope's commentary, most of the, I guess, quick wins have been achieved. Some more enduring, longer items remain. They're going to take a bit more effort. And it's worth noting that we are being aggressive as we work through these, but we are doing these on top of what people ordinarily do. So we're weaving them into daily activities to get them all ticked off. And I will finish there and leave it to the committee for any questions they may have. Thank you.
Richard, just a question from me. Where you say done, I'm looking at particularly page 18 and not particularly the item, but just the phrase done with an asterisk denotes significant effort required. It's been done though, hasn't it? Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Yes, Jim, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I've got three questions. Item 1.3, revaluations. There's a reference here to professional valuers will be engaged on an annual basis. So, just out of curiosity, I thought every 3 years, V and Z did a valuation. So why are we talking about engaging professional valuers annually? Or whoever. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. What we're trying to do is even out the valuations across all the years and then do a proper reval every 3 years. The commentary that came back from the audit office was that we had inconsistencies across different areas of the business and we're simply trying to align them.
So that's an additional cost?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. I believe it would be an additional cost.
So just for clarification, so these are the revaluations for the purposes of the annual report. So it relates to the roading assets, the three waters, property and parks. It's not the general revaluation of the district.
Gotcha. Thank you. Next question, item 1.13. Policy, sensitive expenditure policy does not relate to OAG best practice guidelines. Policy has been established for staff and a separate policy for elected members is in progress. Can you amplify it? Can you give us a bit more information, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Yes, the sensitive expenditure policy for staff has been, I guess, ratified and is now in effect. A similar policy for elected members is currently going through an internal review, and we will be following up with that.
Yeah, perhaps what are we addressing that, or what are we missing out on in terms of OAG best practice? And so what's the focus of these, the one prepared, completed, and the other policy in development?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. What the policy is trying to achieve is it's trying to give clarity to the nature of expenditure of elected members. For example, should approval be required for travel? Is an alcoholic beverage appropriate with a meal? What can or can you not spend money on without it being deemed inappropriate?
Look, my last question, 2.3 corporate. Just looking at the one, this is operational. We talk about contract management, establish contract management policy, procedures, and register. That is something that we've got listed here as to do. So that's something we've got listed here to do. I would have thought that's a pretty fundamental thing. Isn't that a biggie? Maybe I'm just asking, could it perhaps have had a higher priority?
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. Contract management varies from department to department. The way the roading team might manage contracts would vary to how the waters team might vary contracts. And what the audit office here is looking for is, I guess, an overarching principle of how council wants contract management to be managed, to be looked after. And we don't yet have a really, well, I guess, a robust enough process and framework for that to meet the audit officer's satisfaction. So what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at how we do that across all the business areas and providing some sort of guidance and also some sort of structure to getting those policies getting those contracts managed to get best value.
Okay, thank you. What you're suggesting is, should there be a priority list of these, Councillor Hopkins, is that what you were suggesting?
No, not really. I just thought that the whole business and contract management from commencement and through the process of a contract being implemented is a pretty fundamental thing. And I was just wondering if it warranted a higher ranking because it's yet to be done. But Richard's answer.
You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The pleasing thing is there's a huge number of dones on these pages, and congratulations to the team for getting to that point. Be pleasing to see some of these other ones carried out for the next audit when it comes around as well. Are there any other questions on this report,
Chair,
Simon?
If I can, and this is more a comment. Look, I think I agree. It's fantastic. There's been a whole lot of stuff knocked off and things done. But when I sit here and I look at the table and the format of the table, I still don't have the level of comfort that I'd like in terms of understanding when we talk about doing something, and then the asterisks to denote significance of what's being done. I don't get a feel for what are really, really big things and how long those really big things are going to take, and what are the most important things that we have to knock off. So I'd like to see a prioritisation potentially, and then maybe a how long we think this is going to take.
A timeline.
Yeah. Because then we can focus on the stuff that is really, really important, and we can maybe help out more with the things that, are the greatest risks. If somebody asked me independently what I thought the greatest risks were of us not achieving an audit at the moment and within which time, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Good point. That makes sense. Richard, Paul?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think probably at the next meeting, we'll get rid of the duns. So the report will be smaller and more focus very much on the issues that you've raised, with more of an action plan and priority of the remaining items that remain outstanding.
Yeah, and I'm not for a minute asking for us to go into some great scientific evaluation of it, but even just a RAG status or this one's looking tricky.
Okay, thank you. All right, that probably brings the end of that discussion. So we've got to, sorry.
Just a couple of quick questions. On page 16, 1.5, we're talking about updating the policy for the appointment and remuneration of CCO directors. Just wondering if that will be coming to council, and what sort of timeframe we're looking at for that.
My understanding is that policy would probably only go through the council officers, because it's, let me just think about this for a minute, because it's council officers being appointed to the boards. Paul?
No, sorry, this will go through the executive committee.
Yeah.
I think so. It's perhaps something for the exec committee to give some guidance to officers at the meeting later on this morning as to how urgent they see this issue. Because it would, if you want something done for the next round of directors' appointments, we'd need to do it reasonably quickly. But I think it would be a relatively small piece of work. So if it is if the exec committee sees it as a priority, then some direction at the next meeting would be helpful.
I think that probably would be helpful myself, but we can talk about that. Certainly we've talked around timeframes and what we're trying to achieve and the remuneration around it when we revisit that. So to get that into a bit more of a systematic approach would be fantastic. And just the only other question was on 1.6 around the termination of accounts and rights, saying we are doing that now. What were we doing before this got raised by Audit?
So it was certainly happening, but what Audit did find a couple of examples where people access continued what they considered a bit too long after their employment was terminated. So we've added that into the I suppose departure process. So it pretty much happens as soon as someone finishes on payroll, their all their access is terminated. So it was really just formalising that process and making sure it happened. And there were a couple of triggers to go forward rather than just sort of relying on a single one, which was a manager telling IS. We've now embedded into the IS process in the stuff for a word. Sorry, in the termination process. So it's part of that check sheet and just gets passed on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Well, I think we're at the end of the discussion on that paper. Would somebody like to move that we receive and note the information in this paper? Councillor Hopkins, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Halalali. Any further discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Page 20 is a report again from Richard on council mark recommendations. Richard, update, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So very similar to the Audit Office recommendations, we have a separate set of recommendations for improvement from the Council Mark report. In a similar way, we've gone through and we've grouped these into the doing, the dones and the to-dos. It's probably worth pointing out that the majority of the council mark recommendations are not quick wins. They require a sustained and enduring effort. Anything that is a quick win, we've pretty much tackled already, and most of the remaining ones are going to take a long-term effort to make the change. One of the items we're talking about later this afternoon at a workshop, which is our project governance. Some of these we've started a few months ago and we're progressing our way through them, such as the IBIS implementation. These are business change recommendations, business improvement opportunities. So they're not going to happen overnight. They're going to take some effort and a good level of coordination. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion on this paper, please? Councillor Hopkins.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, a couple of questions, both on page 22. Again, perhaps just going back to that Simon's point about priority, I'm looking at the Council Mark Assessor's report on delegations, which I think are pretty fundamental to how we operate and also can be a real trap for young players in terms of court rulings and so on, as we have learned in the past. I'm just wondering whether, again, we should be putting more emphasis on this and getting, if they're saying there should be a higher level of delegations, the simplified, if they were arguing for simplification and clarification and more appropriate delegations, I'm just wondering if you think that should be treated with more emphasis and urgency.
Higher up the list, you mean?
Sorry?
Higher up the list, you mean?
Well, indeed, yes. I don't know who wants to comment.
Yeah, I'll comment on that one. Look, we did a major exercise in terms of the delegations register that Mrs. Guyan led. So that reviewed all of the delegations, reviewed the register, updated all of it. This one is probably bringing something back to you because their concern was about the financial limits, which were reviewed as part of that. They just highlighted a concern that they might be a little too high, so we could review those. And now that the new CE is in place, I think it'd be something important discussion to have with him about his views of those. And probably having something a little simplified. That was something that we're working on to move it from a purely pretty much paper-based system to something that is far easier for officers to look up digitally and reference it that way. And that is something that we are working on, but will take a bit more time. And that would certainly ease any issues in terms of clarification, whether someone has a delegation or not.
Thank you. My second, thank you. That satisfies me. Thank you. The second question, just basically, it's the very next one, the reporting one, where Council Mark said financial reporting needs to increase in frequency. And what our commentary says is that we've decided to basically move away from that and report less frequently. How's that going to work in future? I mean, isn't that going to simply mean that Council Mark will continue to say you ain't reporting frequently enough? Or how will we be able to persuade them that what we've done is an appropriate response to their recommendation?
I think, again, this was a matter we said would basically leave for this triennium. So I think it's a decision for the next council to decide, to review this issue, decide if the reporting is appropriate then. And if the council does decide, I mean, that's a conscious decision, and it's just will be something, well, Council Mark says this, council's actually considered this item explicitly, made a decision, you're comfortable with the decision.
Councillor Tindall.
Just wondering on page 21 at the bottom there, the reporting around infrastructure, and we're talking about future infrastructure investment for the next 30 years report. How does that differ from our 30-year infrastructure strategy?
Thank you, Councillor Tavendale. It doesn't. They're actually the same thing. It's just that the process we go through to forecast our infrastructure is a manual and challenging process, whereas we can probably do a lot better to not just meet that obligation, but also do scenario modeling of our infrastructure needs. And there's a lot of runway in that part of our business. And so all this point here is really making is that we can do it better.
Just to expand on that question a wee bit, I guess then, when is our 30-year infrastructure strategy due to be formally reviewed? And is it something we need to be doing earlier based on, in fact, we might be able to do it better?
Yeah, so I mean, it was reviewed as part of the long-term plan, but I think, yeah, the point they were trying to make, and really picking up what Richard said, is that it should be more integrated into so we should start earlier, it should be more transparent, and really elected members should be involved at an earlier stage, because it is it's a key driver of our costs. And therefore, earlier involvement and more transparency would add to the value of that strategy, rather than it being something we just sort of pulled together in the last 6 months of the long-term plan cycle, and it sort of gets a bit lost in everything else that's going on.
Thank you, Mayor Kitchen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the 3.1, the financial reporting that Councillor Hopkins raised, I think there is a need for us to be looking more regularly, at least at the high level numbers, and to have this committee meets monthly. To only get the financials every quarter, I don't think is enough. But having said that, there are higher level numbers that we could be having a look at, and I think it should also be reporting by exception on anything that is getting out of kilter with where it should be, so that we are giving the financials the appropriate scrutiny that they need. So it is something that I would like to see us reintroduce. The numbers are being done anyway, and so it's not a case of having extra work needing to be done. It just needs to be put into that format that's in the, every quarter we have a really good deep dive into the numbers, and then each month in between we have a look at those high level and exceptions.
Mayor, I think you've been looking at my notes, because just prior to that I wrote down exception reporting and under no surprises reporting from an exception perspective as well. So I totally agree with that. Okay. So that might be something that we could look at more regularly, Paul.
Okay. Sorry, just thinking here. No, I mean, so if that's a direction from the meeting, and you want some further clarity on that response, then we'll work up a sort of a proposal. We'll try and do it pretty quickly so that we can cover this year in terms of a 1 or 2 page report that just sort of covers the items that you've raised. We'll work on that. As you said, we do this reporting anyway, other than for the first month of the year, because that's sort of highlighted in the past, so messy with the year-end adjustments and everything else. So we'll get together something for P2, just a couple of pages of highlights and a couple of charts, just to give some early warning.
Thank you.
So we'll do that.
Definitely, Councillor Percival.
Yeah, through the chair, Richard, page 21, 1.4, project management. I'd like you to elaborate a bit on that. You say minimise overruns. So what about the unders and benefit realisation, improve and transparency? I think it needs a bit more elaboration on that to understand what you're getting at and what you want to do.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Percival. The findings of our Council Mark report, during their assessment, they looked at some of the projects that Council had run, and they noticed some of them, again, from a very strict project management perspective, would have had some variance. So they would have had an overrun. There's probably some underruns as well. But what they're looking for in particular is an alignment with a methodology. They want to know that we run our projects in a controlled environment, and that control is uniform and consistent across the enterprise. So what they're looking for is routine status reporting. They're looking for traffic lights per project for time, money, resources. They want to know that the body, whether it be a department or a committee of council, are getting those consistently and they have control. And these other items in here are all to do with the startup of a project. So the benefits realization is, what is the business case for this project? You've gone and done it. Now, have you realized the benefits? I.e., did the business case actually stand up? And this point here is really a very light couple of sentences to describe what they're looking for. But what they're looking for is for council to have a methodology and for us to be adhering to it. And they want to see evidence that we're adhering to it.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that, and in fact, you've got the paper later on today for discussion that goes into quite a lot of detail about how you could apply that and what you could do.
Yes, to the Chair, thank you, Mr. Neal. Yes, that is correct. The paper coming later today as a workshop speaks to how we could approach project management as a council, letting the department still maintain autonomy and ownership of how they would operate a project, but giving higher levels of governance oversight over all of those projects.
Thank you. Any final questions on that paper? Okay, we've been asked to receive and note the information. Could I have somebody move that, please? Moved. Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Hopkins. Thank you, Councillor King, seconder. Any final discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Another paper from Richard. Thank you. You've been a busy boy. This one on the risk working group update, page 23. Just before I ask, perhaps you could introduce the paper or talk to it first. I have a question under the update, but I'll ask that after you've updated your commentary. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I had the pleasure of meeting with the working group and a position description for a procurement and risk officer role as recommended through Councillor Mark and also hinted at through our audit office, was put to the working group, and we discussed that proposal, and I received some good feedback, which I've subsequently incorporated into that position description. And this role, as I see it, is quite important to council. It will raise the bar on a number of areas: our procurement function, our contract management function, which was raised earlier, and our risk management function. The role will provide hands-on support where necessary, because capability varies across council, but will provide that unifying function to make sure we're all doing it and matters are being escalated and we are treating items across risk and procurement as basically as importantly as they ought to be. And the next steps for us now is to go through the HR function and to have the position accurately sized and then look at how we finance it, because we did make allocations for this position through our long-term plan. So it is funded to an extent, and then to go through the recruitment function. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Just a question that I had, which I think is quite significant under the update. You said here, insinuate, successfully introduced change and decrease siloed functions across all departments. Now, this was quite a major discussion point we had, and this role you're suggesting will help eliminate the siloed functions and get standardisation across all elements of council, which is good. So compliments for that and putting that in there, but there's more work to be done yet before it comes anywhere near approval and things like that. So you're working on that at the moment. Okay, any commentary?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I guess the question that I have is, it feels like we are very dependent on recruiting this new person before we can actually do anything. And if I go back to the very first meeting that I came to, where Paul presented the risk matrix at the beginning and we talked through it, we're now kind of 3-4 months down the track, and we're still working on recruiting that person. And I understand these things take time, but what would Council Mark's response be if we went back and said, yeah, this is important, but we've got to get a bum on a seat first? Is there anything that we can be doing as a working group or as a subset of a working group? Is there anything that we can be doing to help move this along until we appoint somebody? Because as we discussed in our working group, we agree that actually appointing a person into this role could be a timely process given the skill sets you're looking for.
Yeah, I'll back that one up. Thanks. Look, no, we can absolutely continue on addressing the items in the risk register, updating that, and working with the working party. No, and it's really the pace of change will accelerate with this role, but there's certainly a commitment to improving risk practice, to getting really as much in place so that the role, when it is recruited, can sort of hit the ground running, and we've got a very clear direction in terms of what the priorities are for the person, and the key changes that both we want from an officer point of view and from an elected member point of view or committee member point of view. No, we're not going to pause or sort of put things on hold. It's the priority has been the long-term plan for the sort of almost the first 2 quarters of the year. But I think, from the previous 2 reports, Richard has managed to, put a focus on this over the last really 6 to 7 weeks. And, even with that focus, we've made significant progress on getting a lot of those items finished off and completed. So, we'd look to continue that.
Should we perhaps try and have an action where we pull together that risk working group again to go through the risks and review them? Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that was the next intent for that working group, was to go through that risk register. That was sort of the second item that was discussed, I think, at the last meeting. So yeah, we'll pull it together,
right.
Go through those risks again and start setting some priorities.
And also, Simon, at that point, we may well have more information from HR about skill sets and specs of that role, which we can discuss at that point as well. Councillor Hopkins.
Yeah, look, apologies if this sounds negative, but I'm not entirely happy with not so much the report, but what appears to be what is going to happen from now on. Just backing up the truck, it seems to me, arguably, that the roles identified for this risk management and procurement function are a bit like drafting rules for a sport or a new parliamentary statute. It seems to me they're a fixed term, both activities are of a fixed term nature, and once the rules of the sport or the statute's been produced, then everyone incorporates, internalises it and operates accordingly. So I'm still not absolutely persuaded that we need a person, or that we need a full-time person in perpetuity. And there's maybe it was looked at by the committee or the working group, but there's nothing in here to say these are other options we looked at. Equally, it does trouble me that if you look at the last paragraph, what we're told at the bottom there is workshops provided guidance. This is guidance from 2 elected members only out of 10, plus the mayor. And we're now saying that in response to that, and one appointed person, the updated position description will now be processed by HR and then approved by the executive leadership team. Now, there's nothing in there that indicates the council is going to sign off another permanent employee. And I'm sorry, I'm not absolutely satisfied.
That will most definitely happen
Well,
after the next meeting.
Okay, but it doesn't say so here.
It has to come through council.
Right.
And we have to have more information on it.
Right. Well, okay, in that case, I read what I read, and that is not included in this report. I just am troubled that we are creating a job when in fact what we want are a series of processes, rules and procedures that could be done on a fixed term contracted basis by somebody who is not subsequently a permanent additional employee of the council. And back to your point, very briefly, in my view, the executive committee and all the full council should resolve matters of appointment before they're actually described in terms like this, where the executive leadership team starts recruiting without apparent reference to us. So those are my comments.
Yes, thank you. Paul or Richard, any comment?
Right. Okay, this position has been discussed, I think, 3 times.
Yeah, and it's in the long-term plan.
It's in the long-term plan. It is funded. Sorry. You have approved this role. The nature of this discussion was to make sure this role was going to meet the expectations of the committee in terms of the reporting function and the likely progress in the risk and procurement area. So you may want to bring this up with the chief executive, but as far as I'm concerned, we've pretty much finished that process and we are going out to recruit this role. This was to discuss some aspects of the position description to make sure that they met the expectations of the committee. It is not never saw this as a relitigation of the role and the wider duties attached to it.
If I may, Chair, from an independent observation, not having this function and also backed up by Council Mark, not having this function is a glaring governance deficiency in this organisation.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Hopkins, one final question.
I have expressed the view previously that I don't believe it necessarily has to be a permanent appointment in perpetuity. I would have thought the funding in the long-term plan is to achieve outcomes, not necessarily to appoint a person. But that's a matter of debate, and I accept the point you're making. I still just continue to say that that I'm not absolutely satisfied that we've done enough due diligence. And if we're talking about business plans before we proceed with things, I'm not sure there's been a clear enough and detailed enough and rigorous enough analysis of alternatives in this instance before we alight on a permanent appointment, when in fact I still stand by my view that it could be a fixed term contract to develop a set of rules, processes and procedures. I'll leave it there.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask our new chief executive and formally welcome him to the meeting. And I'm sorry I overlooked that at the very start, but here's your entree, Alex. Go to it.
Thank you, I think, through you, Chair. I'd just say in terms of this position, I had a similar position in my last organisation, and it was a very busy role that ensured that, one, the organisation operated very safely because it was supporting managers and members in managing risk in taking on new projects. But more importantly, that ensuring that our procurement systems were right and in procuring large and small, that we were getting value for money for our ratepayers. And it was an extremely busy position. So at this stage, I'd say in terms of having read the Council Mark report, we need this capacity. And I think you'll find it be an ongoing support to all members in this chamber in ensuring that we manage risk effectively and get value for money for ratepayers.
Thank you very much. And I've just been advised that we saw a really good view of the wallpaper before, and people that sit in that seat over there apparently have to stand up. So, Alex, sorry we didn't see your face, but the wallpaper looked really good. Okay, look, thank you very much for that. Is there any further discussion on that paper at all? No further discussion. Okay, we've been asked to note that as well. So would somebody like to move that, please? Who's going to move that? Thank you, Guy, very much. Second up. Thank you, Mayor Kircher. All in favour, please say aye. Aye, against, carried. Thank you. On to our health and safety update. Bill, welcome to you. We're on page 24. Thank you for coming and presenting. Floor's yours.
Me first, sorry.
Sorry, I should have said you go first.
Yeah.
Please go first.
I mean, this report is significantly sort of longer and more detailed, which is a reflection of both the audit and Council Mark recommendations in terms of reporting health and safety issues to elected members. So yeah, Bill and Richard have done a lot of work on this paper, and I believe you One of the other recommendations was carried out this morning.
Yes.
With a site visit by some of the elected members. So yeah, it's good to be making progress in this area. I'll now hand over to Bill to talk about any particular items of the report that he feels should be highlighted and then questions.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill, welcome.
Hi, through the chair, I'd like to just express a couple of comments before I turn to the report. Since the last parent meeting, there's been greater engagement with council officers and the contractors to follow up on incidents. Incidents have been raised in the monthly meetings, but then they've dropped and they've never been looked at. So I challenge the council officers to follow through, and they are doing so. And so that's a very pleasing trend to see. And I also want to note that the Health and Safety Committee has stepped up a notch too, in terms of its engagement over the health and safety related matters that are presented to it. So having said that, I'd like to introduce the health and safety update since the last meeting. I just propose to endorse the comments already said about contractor management. That is our key focus for health and safety. And to reiterate what I said at the last meeting, that we're looking for that same consistency across council. If we end up with 15 contractor management steps that Roading and Three Waters might use, the other parts of the organisation will use exactly the same steps they choose out of those 15 that are appropriate to their activity. So having said that, the contractor management, we put the draft policy out to some representative members across council to get a good cross-representation of approaches and trying to get some consistency. The issue that's been raised in the feedback so far is how to deal with low value, low risk contracts that actually add up to significant value over time, with the overarching thing of being good value for the ratepayer. So there's been some constructive debate there that's been taken up into the policy. The policy, as I say in the report, draft policy, sorry, will be presented to the Health and Safety Committee for their view and take back to the respective members, again, to get across that siloing effect across the organisation and become consistent. And from there, we'll go up to the executive leadership team for their review and approval in September. Crisis preparedness. We started off with it being what the lessons learned from pandemic preparedness, but it's a wider approach, and it's about equipping everybody in council with the roles and responsibilities. And it's the nature of the crisis, which the crisis response team will decide through the CE. But everybody then goes into the mode. And we've been doing quite a high level approach, but now we're seeing that there's some significant bodies of work that need to spit out from our initial approach. So we've got the initiation of a response, we've got the actual response itself, and then how we stand down, and everybody's roles within that. So I've been working with other councils to see what they're doing in that area, and I have to say that we're doing a much more comprehensive body of work, which will serve the council well going forwards. That is something I will share with the Canterbury cluster, which I'm part of, with the Health and Safety Advisory Group amongst councils. They've input a lot to my role here, so I just want to share the love going back the other way. The next thing that I find very interesting under the wellbeing, I'm very interested. I started the dialogue with the new CE, Alex, and his health and safety induction, and he's got quite a few initiatives that he's been involved in, both wellbeing amongst staff, but also elected members and the community. So I'm all ears, looking forward to that. The health and safety reporting that you see before you now is just the second tweak of what Council Mark and the audit have proposed. I've again gleaned it from what other councils are doing, and it is an area that a lot of councils seem to struggle with getting meaningful reporting to the elected members, to the executive leadership team, and even down to the second tier managers. So we're working with our team to produce the best result. Crisis response plan. Since the last meeting, I've actually looked at what Ahuriri have done, because they've had a fairly comprehensive view. It's fair to say that they took the alert level approach rather than the comprehensive approach that we're taking. So I think there were a couple of items in there that were just added to what we're doing. And I suspect that's what's going to happen going forwards. We'll continue to seek guidance from other councils, so we're not reinventing the wheel, and just adding those bits that we find that aren't already incorporated, so it's more meaningful for us. The next thing, the site visits, I'm very excited to hear the PAR meeting went out on site, so I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback from there. So in terms of the report, the explanations are there. We've highlighted the 4 key areas. I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Bill. Open to the floor. Any questions, please? Anna, Councillor Halleley.
Thank you very much for that report. Just looking at page 25, I'm very pleased to read in terms of a due diligence pack that will be presented or at least provided for elected members to at least assess and monitor health and safety from a governance perspective. So thank you.
Yes.
For that, I think that'll be really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hopkins.
Quick question. On page 26, there's a reference to the number of accidents in the pool triggered by the slippery floor. I know your report says that remedial action has been taken, but with 32 accidents there, are you satisfied the remedial action is going to be enough, or should we just admit that it needs to be replaced? What's your view?
My view is that most of those incidents happened in the first 2 months. Matthew Lanyon actually came to the park committee and explained what was going on. They've done the corrective steps in terms of the cleaning to assist. I think they've got it under control. I'm finding there's very few incidents that can be directly related to the slippery floor.
Great, thank you. Perfect. Councillor Tippendale.
Just on the same area around the Alps to Ocean incidents, I just want to know if you want to comment on whether things like reception is an issue. And I'm impressed to hear that we know about 29 incidents. How do they get reported through?
Okay, so what's happening is recreation. We've got a recreation officer that's looking after Alps to Ocean. The liability to council is relating to the upkeep of the track. And so we are trying to find from all sources, including first responders, the actual incidents, because we then get our contractors to look at that section of the track to see if it's a maintenance issue or whether it's a rider error. It's fair to say the last 3 months has seen a lot of activity where tour guides, first responders are suddenly getting why we're trying to track this information. So there's been a good uptake from there.
That's great news. Is getting emergency services to those areas and, you know, the reception side of things, is that an issue on the track as far as you're aware?
No, they've had helicopters to take out seriously injured people.
Could I just ask a question, if I may? Has the number of incidents increased since the sailors cutting to the Benmore Dam section has been opened? Or would you know that? Maybe you may not know.
I don't know that at this point. I can find it out for the meeting.
Just interested. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Because cell coverage through that area is quite limited.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Simon.
Sorry, just through the chair, Bill. I think the level of reporting that we've got around sort of specific hard incidents is really, really good, and it's great as you go forward. I guess just picking up on some of the comments you made earlier and about what Alex potentially brings to the table, I'd like to get a better feel for some of the softer kind of issues that we've got. So, you know, we know that Unfortunately, abuse seems to be increasing amongst our staff. We know that COVID and the pandemic and people having to work from home and not being able to come to the office has caused quite a lot of stress and anxiety.
Yes.
I'm just wondering whether there was anything that we could do around those would, monitoring, say, sick leave or redundancies or, sorry, not redundancies, resignations. Is there any of those softer targets that we could get a feel on for the sort of the health of the team?
Yes, I have raised with the group manager, people and culture, the ability to check out sick leave, what's happening there, annual leave, what's happening there. I understand it's reported separately to council. Am I correct, Paul? I'm not sure.
Infrequently.
Yeah, just it's a tougher job out there for people, and it would be nice to feel for the health of our people, which is hard because you can't just tick a box and say someone slipped over the pool.
No, I mean, we certainly at the exec team level have been monitoring sick leave, the amount of leave, and we are concerned about that. But probably the biggest, I think, the area where there has been the biggest change is probably a lot of the discussions at the Health and Safety Committee. So that's made up of representatives from every area of council, and probably wellbeing aspects and wellbeing issues. The main topic of discussion probably over the last 12 months. So very much moved away from how do we manage contractors and some of those more reportable things to how do we monitor the well-being of staff.
Yes.
Most teams, pretty much all teams, have team meetings, and it is a topic of discussion of those meetings. There's and then each team has sort of come up with their own way of monitoring sort of how people are doing.
Yep.
A reasonable amount of self-reporting, and once that gets underway and people are more comfortable sort of sharing about how they're feeling and what's actually stressing them out, I think then that's that's a good way to sort of discuss those issues with your team that you've got a good relationship with, that are sharing common concerns, and one person raises it, either someone else has got a solution or a shared issue, and so that way it can get escalated to the Health and Safety Committee. So I think that's probably the main way we're doing it, which is just that you're getting people to sort of look after each other, I think, rather than sort of doing a survey and things like that. But we're always looking for new ways to really monitor what's going on with people, because the abuse in particular and I think the negative interactions with some of the customers is increasing. That does take a toll, and we're concerned about that.
I think just something from this committee and on behalf of all elected members, that we do take health and safety extremely seriously. And question is there anything elected members can do to help the Health and Safety Committee in any way or shape or form? And if there is, please let us know, because we do take it seriously. Okay, thank you. Right, any final discussion on this paper before I get somebody to move we receive it and note it? Thank you. Who would like to move that? Jeremy, thank you very much. Councillor Holding, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Any final discussion? All in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Well, that comes... thank you. Comes to the end of the formal meeting. We'll go into public executive. Move Councillor Hopkins, seconded by Councillor King. Thank you very much. All in favour, aye. Against, carried. Thank you. We'll just take a small breather while we get organised here.